A billionaire discovers he's sterile, then a black woman gives him twins. But nothing about this moment is what it seems. He walks into a hospital thinking it's just another charity visit, until a newborn baby is placed in his arms. And the paperwork says he's the father. He knows that's impossible. She knows she never met him. Yet somehow, the babies look exactly like him. Before they can even breathe, a powerful clinic steps in, trying to take the twins away and bury the truth forever. And just when they start to fight back together, a heartbreaking secret about one of the babies threatens to tear everything apart. If your whole life told you the truth was impossible, would you fight for the miracle anyway? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The morning sun painted Denver's skyline in shades of gold and amber as Dylan Renner stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. The glass-wrapped living room offered a sweeping view of the city he'd called home for all of his 42 years. But this morning, like many others, the beauty before him couldn't quite pierce the hollow feeling in his chest. He adjusted his navy silk tie, smoothing it against his crisp white shirt. The charity board meeting at Memorial Hospital loomed ahead. Another day of maintaining the careful image he'd built. Dylan's reflection stared back at him from the window. Successful businessman, philanthropist, eligible bachelor. The public saw what he wanted them to see. Nobody knew about the illness that had changed everything 15 years ago. The memory surfaced unwanted, like it always did around hospitals. The fever that wouldn't break. The weeks of tests. The doctor's gentle voice delivering the news that had shattered his dreams of fatherhood. Complete sterility, they'd called it. Such clinical words for such a personal loss. Dylan turned away from the window, his expensive shoes clicking against the hardwood floors as he made his way to his kitchen. The space was all sleek appliances and marble countertops, designed for entertaining but mostly unused. He grabbed a protein bar and coffee from his state-of-the-art machine. Breakfast for one, as usual. Time to face the day, he muttered to himself, gathering his leather briefcase and car keys. The elevator ride down 30 floors gave him time to put on his public face, the mask of the confident CEO who had everything under control. His Tesla waited in its reserved spot in the underground garage. The car's quiet hum matched his mood as he navigated through downtown Denver's morning traffic. Memorial Hospital rose ahead of him, its modern glass facade reflecting the morning light. Dylan had donated millions to this place over the years, but every visit still made his stomach knot. The hospital director, Dr. Thompson, waited at the main entrance, his silver hair neatly combed and his tie perfectly straight. "Mr. Renner, thank you for coming today." He extended his hand with a practiced smile. "We're excited to show you the improvements to the maternity wing that your generous donation has made possible." Dylan shook his hand firmly, his media-ready smile in place. "Looking forward to it, Dr. Thompson." The lie came easily after years of practice. They walked through the hospital's main lobby, their footsteps echoing on the polished floors. The director launched into an enthusiastic explanation of the new equipment and facilities. But Dylan only half listened. Each step toward the maternity wing felt heavier than the last. "The new birthing suites are state-of-the-art," Dr. Thompson was saying as they rounded a corner. "The mothers especially appreciate the—" Dylan nodded mechanically, fighting to keep his expression neutral as they passed a young couple walking their newborn down the hall, the father's proud smile, the mother's tender gaze at their baby. It was like a knife to his heart. These were moments he would never know, joys he would never experience. They passed the nursery window, and Dylan forced himself not to look at the rows of newborns. He'd become an expert at this careful dance of appearing interested while keeping his emotional distance. His responses were automatic now. "Impressive. Excellent work. Money well spent. A nurse hurried past with a clipboard, and Dylan caught a whiff of baby powder and antiseptic. The combination made his chest tighten. He'd never told anyone how much these visits affected him. Not his PR team, not his board members, not even Aunt Margaret, who seemed to see through him most days. Dr. Thompson led him down another corridor, still talking about infection rates and patient satisfaction scores. Dylan checked his watch, calculating how much longer he needed to maintain this facade. That's when he heard it. Rapid footsteps approaching from behind. "Mr. Renner, please, we need your help." He turned to see a nurse running toward him, her face flushed and urgent. Her scrubs were wrinkled, and wisps of hair had escaped from her ponytail. The look in her eyes made his carefully maintained composure crack just slightly. "It's an emergency," she said breathlessly, coming to a stop in front of him. "Please, you're the only one who can help us." Dylan felt his mask of polite detachment slipping as the nurse's desperate expression met his eyes. For the first time that morning, he couldn't predict what would happen next, and that uncertainty sent a shiver of unease down his spine. The nurse's fingers wrapped around Dylan's wrist, pulling him forward with surprising strength. "This way, quickly." Her shoes squeaked against the polished hospital floor as she guided him past several doors. "What's the emergency?" Dylan asked, struggling to keep pace while maintaining his professional demeanor. The antiseptic smell grew stronger as they moved deeper into the maternity ward. "Twin delivery," the nurse explained breathlessly. "Dr. Martinez is stuck handling a critical C-section. Our midwife needs immediate administrative authorization to proceed with certain procedures, and you're the highest-ranking person available right now." Before Dylan could protest that surely there were better qualified people to handle this, the nurse pushed open a door marked Delivery Room 3. The scene that greeted him made his breath catch in his throat. The room buzzed with controlled intensity. Medical equipment beeped steadily, and the air felt thick with anticipation. Two other nurses moved efficiently around a young woman on the delivery bed, her face flushed with effort. Beside her stood a midwife, tall and slender, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Despite the tension in the room, her movements were calm and purposeful. "Ms. Blake," one of the nurses called out. "First twin's heart rate is dropping slightly." The midwife, Ms. Blake, nodded without taking her eyes off her patient. "I see it. We're going to need to move quickly now." Her voice carried a gentle authority that seemed to steady everyone in the room. "Sarah, sweetheart, you're doing beautifully. On the next contraction, I need you to give me everything you've got." Dylan pressed himself against the wall near the door, trying to become invisible. He'd never witnessed a birth before, and the raw humanity of the moment made him feel like an intruder. Yet he couldn't look away from the scene unfolding before him. The laboring mother, Sarah, gripped the sides of the bed. "I can't. I'm so tired." "Yes, you can," Ms. Blake encouraged, her voice warm but firm. "Your babies need you to be strong for just a little longer. Take a deep breath with me." Dylan watched in amazement as the midwife's calm confidence seemed to flow into her patient. Sarah's breathing steadied, matching Ms. Blake's demonstration. The monitors beeped more urgently, and Ms. Blake's expression sharpened with focus. "Here comes the contraction. Push now, Sarah. That's it. Keep going. Keep going!" The next few minutes passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Dylan found himself holding his breath as the first tiny head emerged, followed quickly by shoulders and then, in a rush, the rest of a small body. A thin cry pierced the air. "Beautiful boy," Ms. Blake announced, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she checked the newborn. "Time to meet your brother now, little one." The second delivery proceeded even more quickly than the first. Dylan marveled at how Ms. Blake seemed to anticipate every need, directing her team with quiet commands while never letting her encouraging words to Sarah falter. Within minutes, a second cry joined the first. "Another perfect boy," Ms. Blake said, her face glowing with joy as she worked. "Sarah, you've done wonderfully. Your sons are absolutely beautiful." The new mother's exhausted face transformed with happiness as the cleaned and swaddled babies were placed on her chest. The sight made Dylan's throat tighten unexpectedly. He started to step backward towards the door, feeling he'd witnessed something almost sacred. "Mr. Renner." A nurse approached him with a clipboard. "We need your signature on these forms to complete the authorization." He nodded, grateful for something practical to focus on. The nurse handed him a pen, and he began signing where indicated. From the corner of his eye, he saw another nurse approaching Ms. Blake with paperwork, presumably the baby's birth certificates. The room had settled into a peaceful quiet, broken only by soft baby sounds and the steady beep of monitors. Then suddenly, that peace shattered. This can't be right." Ms. Blake's voice had lost its earlier confidence, replaced by something that sounded like fear. Dylan looked up from his clipboard. The midwife stood frozen, staring at the document in her trembling hands. All the color had drained from her face, making her look almost ghostly under the bright hospital lights. "Ms. Blake?" he asked, concerned by her obvious distress. "Is something wrong?" She raised her eyes to meet his, and the shock he saw there made him step forward. Without speaking, she held out the paper. Dylan took it, wondering what could have affected her so strongly. His eyes scanned the birth certificate form, moving past the twins' details to the parents' information. Then he saw it. There, in clear black type under father's name, was printed, "Dylan James Renner." The clipboard slipped from his suddenly numb fingers, clattering against the floor in the dead silence of the room. He stared at the form, reading and rereading those 3 words that couldn't possibly be there. The room seemed to tilt slightly as the implications crashed over him in waves. His mind raced through the medical facts he'd lived with for 15 years, the test results, the doctor's confirmations of his sterility. It wasn't possible. It simply wasn't possible. Yet there it was, in stark official text, his name listed as the father of these newborn twins. He lifted his gaze to find Ms. Blake watching him, her expression a mirror of his own shock and disbelief. The machines continued their steady beeping. The babies made soft mewling sounds, but Dylan could hear nothing except the rushing of blood in his ears as he stared at the document that defied everything he thought he knew about his life. The silence in the delivery room grew heavier with each passing second. Dylan's hands gripped the birth certificate so tightly the paper crinkled at the edges. A nurse whispered something about getting the hospital administrator, her footsteps hurrying away. Adeline touched Sarah's shoulder gently. "I need to step out for a moment," she said, maintaining her professional composure despite her inner turmoil. "The nurses will take excellent care of you and your beautiful boys." She gestured for Dylan to follow her. Her legs felt unsteady as she led him down the corridor to a small consultation room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she closed the door behind them, her hands trembling. "Mr. Renner," she began, her voice quavering. I've never seen you before in my life. This has to be some kind of mistake." Dylan sank into one of the chairs, still clutching the birth certificate. "It's impossible," he said, his voice rough. "I can't father children. I haven't been able to for 15 years. Adeline's legs finally gave out, and she dropped into the chair across from him. "What?" "An illness when I was younger," he explained, running a hand through his hair. "The treatments, the doctors were very clear about the effects. There's no possibility—" His words trailed off as Adeline covered her face with her hands, her shoulders beginning to shake. Tears slipped between her fingers. "Miss Blake?" Dylan leaned forward. concern overriding his own shock. "What is it?" She drew in a shuddering breath. 2 years ago, I lost my fiancé, James, in a car accident." Her voice broke on the words. "We'd been trying to start a family. After I lost him, I couldn't let go of that dream. I went through a reputable clinic, used what I thought was anonymous donor sperm. The paperwork, the screening process, everything was supposed to be confidential." Dylan's face paled further. "When?" "9 months ago." She wiped at her tears. I never expected to know the donor's identity. It wasn't supposed to happen this way." A knock at the door made them both jump. The hospital administrator entered, his expression grave as he carried a stack of forms. "Mr. Renner, Ms. Blake," he said, closing the door. "I'm afraid we need to document this incident immediately. There are serious privacy and liability concerns that must be addressed." Adeline's breath caught in her throat. "Please," she whispered. I can't handle this right now." The administrator's face softened slightly, but he pressed on. "I understand this is overwhelming, but we need to follow proper protocols. The fertility clinic will need to be notified, and there may be legal ramifications." Adeline stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. "My babies," she said, her voice cracking. "They're barely an hour old, and already there's talk of legal ramifications. I did everything right, everything by the book. How did this happen?" She turned to Dylan, her eyes pleading. "Please don't leave me alone in this. I know you don't know me and this isn't your fault, but please." Dylan rose from his chair, his expression conflicted but determined. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. "We'll figure this out together." The administrator cleared his throat. "If I could get your signatures on these initial forms, give us a moment," Dylan said firmly. The authority in his voice made the administrator step back. "Of course, I'll wait outside." When the door closed, Adeline swiped at fresh tears. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked that of you. This isn't your responsibility." "Ms. Blake, Adeline," she corrected automatically. "I think we're well past formalities." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Adeline, whatever happened here, whatever mistake was made, you and those babies shouldn't have to face it alone." From down the hall came the distinct sound of newborn crying, 2 voices raised in perfect harmony. Adeline's head turned instinctively toward the sound, her body tensing as if ready to run to them. Dylan felt it too, an unexpected pull like a hook behind his ribs, drawing him toward those tiny voices. The sensation startled him. He'd spent years avoiding the maternity ward during his hospital visits. And now? "We should get back," Adeline said softly. "They'll need feeding soon." They walked back to the maternity ward together, the twins' cries growing louder. Outside the room, the administrator waited with his forms. Dylan held up a hand before he could speak. "I want a DNA test," he said firmly, "just to prove the paperwork is wrong." The administrator nodded. "I'll make the arrangements immediately." Adeline touched Dylan's arm lightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying." Dylan looked at her, then at the door behind which 2 newborn boys were crying for their mother. His world had tilted on its axis in the span of an hour, but something deep inside him knew he couldn't walk away, not until they had answers. "Of course," he said simply, and opened the door for her to return to her sons. The morning sun hadn't yet cleared Denver's eastern buildings when Dylan pulled into the hospital parking garage. His hands shook slightly as he turned off the engine, the result of too much coffee and too little sleep. The digital clock on his dashboard read 6:45 in the morning. He'd spent the night pacing his penthouse, watching the city lights and replaying yesterday's events like a movie he couldn't pause. Every time he'd closed his eyes, he saw those tiny faces in the nursery, heard their newborn cries echoing in his memory. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt endless. When the doors opened to the genetic testing lab corridor, he saw Adeline already there, sitting in one of the hard plastic chairs. She wore simple jeans and a soft blue sweater, her honey-brown hair pulled back in a messy bun. Dark circles under her eyes matched his own. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, offering a tired smile. "You couldn't sleep either." "Not a wink," Dylan admitted, settling into the chair beside her. He noticed she had a paper cup of tea clutched between her hands, the string of the tea bag hanging over the edge. "How are the boys?" "Still in the nursery. They're doing great." Her voice softened with maternal pride, then wavered slightly. "I've been up since 4 o'clock this morning, just thinking." "Yeah," Dylan said quietly. "Me too." They sat in silence for a few minutes. The hospital's morning sounds drifting down the hallway, cartwheels squeaking, phones ringing at distant nurses' stations, the gentle hum of conversation. "I keep telling myself this has to be a mistake," Adeline said suddenly, staring into her tea. "But then I think about how careful I was with everything. I researched that clinic for months before choosing them. Their success rates, their protocols." She trailed off, shaking her head. Dylan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I never told anyone about the treatments," he confessed. "About becoming sterile. It felt too personal, too final. The press would have had a field day with it. The billionaire who can't have heirs." He gave a bitter laugh. Adeline touched his arm gently. "I'm so sorry." Before Dylan could respond, footsteps approached, and they both looked up to see a woman in a white lab coat carrying a tablet. "Mr. Renner, Ms. Blake, I'm Dr. Chen from the genetics lab. Would you follow me, please?" They walked down the sterile hallway to a small consultation room. Dylan's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Beside him, Adeline's breathing had become shallow and quick. Dr. Chen gestured for them to sit, then took her own seat behind the desk. She looked between them with kind eyes. "I know you've both been waiting anxiously for these results. We ran the tests multiple times to ensure absolute accuracy." She turned her tablet around, showing them a complex diagram of matching genetic markers. "The DNA analysis confirms without any doubt that Mr. Renner is the biological father of both twins." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Dylan gripped the arms of his chair, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under him. Joy, grief, and disbelief crashed through him in waves. Joy at the impossible gift of fatherhood he'd thought forever denied to him. Grief for all the years he'd believed he could never have children. And overwhelming disbelief that any of this was real. A soft sobbing sound made him turn. Adeline had covered her face with her hands, tears streaming between her fingers. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Without thinking, Dylan reached over and took her hand. "This isn't your fault," he said firmly, though his own voice shook. "You did everything right." Dr. Chen cleared her throat gently. "The hospital's legal team would like to speak with both of you, if you're feeling up to it. They're concerned about the implications of these results." 15 minutes later, they sat in a larger conference room. The hospital's chief legal counsel, a sharp-featured woman named Sarah Martinez, spread several documents on the table before them. "Ms. Blake," she began, "could you tell us the name of the fertility clinic you used?" "New Life Fertility Center," Adeline replied, her voice steadier now. "On Madison Street." Martinez's lips pressed into a thin line. "We've had concerns about that facility before. Nothing concrete enough for action, but... She paused, choosing her words carefully. These results suggest something far more serious than a paperwork error. The type of genetic material Mr. Renner provided during his cancer treatments years ago was specifically stored at a different facility, under strict security protocols. For it to have somehow ended up at New Life Fertility Center. Are you saying someone stole it? Dylan's voice was sharp with sudden anger. Martinez held up a placating hand. We can't make any accusations without proof, but given the circumstances and the fact that Mr. Renner never gave consent for his genetic material to be used for donation, she let the implications hang in the air. This could indicate serious malpractice, possibly criminal behavior. Adeline's face had gone pale. Oh, God, she whispered. How many other women might have? She couldn't finish the sentence. Dylan felt cold reality settling over him like ice. What had seemed yesterday like an impossible mistake was transforming into something much darker. He looked at Adeline, saw the same dawning horror in her eyes, and knew they were thinking the same thing. This was just the beginning. Martinez gathered her papers with practiced efficiency. I suggest you both retain personal counsel immediately. The hospital will cooperate fully with any investigation, but our primary concern must be protecting patient confidentiality and institutional liability. The morning sun cast long shadows through the hospital conference room windows as Dylan paced, checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Adeline sat quietly at the large oak table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide their trembling. They're late, Dylan muttered, his polished dress shoes clicking against the tile floor. Adeline smoothed her navy blouse, a nervous habit she'd developed over the past 24 hours. Maybe that's good. Maybe they're preparing an apology. Before Dylan could respond, the door swung open. A tall man in an expensive charcoal suit strode in, followed by the fertility clinic director and 2 other men carrying briefcases. The attorney's face was as cold and rigid as carved stone. Mr. Renner, Ms. Blake, the attorney said, not bothering with introductions as he took his seat. Let's make this brief. Dylan returned to his chair beside Adeline, noticing how the clinic director wouldn't meet either of their eyes. Something in the attorney's tone made his stomach tighten. We filed an emergency petition with the court this morning, the attorney continued, sliding documents across the table. The clinic is requesting temporary custody of the infants until this matter can be fully investigated. The words hit like a physical blow. Adeline made a small, wounded sound beside Dylan. What? Dylan's voice came out as a dangerous whisper. On what grounds? The attorney's lip curled slightly. Both. You and Ms. Blake are clearly emotionally compromised by these circumstances. Your unstable reactions pose a potential risk to the children's well-being. Unstable? Adeline's voice cracked. You stole genetic material, created lives without consent, and now you're calling us unstable? Tears spilled down her cheeks. Case in point, the attorney said coldly, gesturing toward her. This kind of emotional display precisely demonstrates our concerns. Dylan stood so quickly his chair nearly toppled. How dare you? You commit what appears to be criminal fraud, and now you're trying to take away children from their mother? Mr. Renner, the attorney's voice carried a warning edge, I strongly suggest you both remain cooperative. There are additional aspects to this situation that haven't come to light yet. Aspects that could prove quite damaging to everyone involved if handled incorrectly. The clinic director shifted uncomfortably in his seat, still avoiding eye contact. Dylan's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Are you threatening us? He demanded, simply stating facts. The attorney replied smoothly. The clinic is prepared to handle this situation discreetly, provided everyone maintains a professional demeanor. We'll be in touch regarding the custody hearing." He stood, gathering his papers. "Good day." The clinic representatives filed out, leaving Dylan and Adeline in stunned silence. As soon as the door closed, Adeline buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Dylan knelt beside her chair, gently touching her arm. "Adeline, look at me." He waited until she raised her tear-stained face. "I will not let them take your babies. Do you hear me? We're going to fight this. But what if—" She hiccuped, trying to steady her voice. "What if they have something else? Something worse?" "Then we'll face it," Dylan said firmly. "But those are our children in that nursery. No matter what they try to hold over us, we're not giving them up." Adeline wiped her eyes, taking several deep breaths. "I need to see them," she whispered. "Please." Dylan helped her to her feet, keeping a steadying hand under her elbow as they walked to the elevator. The maternity ward was quiet when they arrived, most new mothers resting during the morning lull. Through the nursery window, they could see the twins sleeping peacefully in their bassinets. Both had dark curls like their mother, and what Dylan now recognized as his own nose. Watching them, so innocent and unaware of the storm gathering around them, made his chest ache. "They're perfect," Adeline whispered, pressing her hand against the glass. Dylan studied the tiny faces, marveling at how quickly they had claimed space in his heart. Despite the circumstances, despite the shock and anger and fear, he knew with absolute certainty that he would do anything to protect them. "We're going to fight this," he said softly, his voice full of quiet determination. "Together." Adeline turned to look at him, and their eyes met. In that moment, something shifted between them, an unspoken understanding, a shared resolve. They were no longer just two strangers thrown together by circumstance. They were parents, united in their determination to protect their children. The twins slept on, unaware of the silent pact being made on their behalf, as morning sunlight streamed through the nursery windows, casting a gentle glow over their peaceful faces. The early morning air held a crisp bite as Dylan stood outside the courthouse steps, two steaming coffee cups in hand. His suit felt like armor, carefully chosen for the battle ahead. When he spotted Adeline approaching, her face pale but determined, his heart clenched at how exhausted she looked. "I wasn't sure how you'd take it," he said, offering her one of the cups. "But I had them add extra cream." "Thank you." Adeline's fingers brushed his as she accepted the coffee, and he noticed they were trembling slightly. "I barely slept last night." "Me neither." Dylan gestured toward the imposing courthouse doors. "Ready?" Adeline took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "As I'll ever be." They climbed the steps together, their footsteps echoing in the marble lobby. Dylan had arranged for his company's top legal team to meet them, and 3 sharp-suited attorneys were already waiting outside courtroom 3. "The twins?" Dylan asked softly as they sat on a wooden bench, waiting to be called. "With my mother," Adeline replied, staring into her coffee cup. "She's staying with us at the hospital for now. I couldn't bear to be away from them." Before Dylan could respond, the courtroom doors opened. Inside, the clinic's attorney sat at one table, looking smugly confident. Dylan and Adeline took their places at the opposite table with their legal team, the polished wood barrier between them feeling like a shield. Judge Martha Reeves, a woman with steel-grey hair and keen eyes, studied the emergency petition with obvious displeasure. "Let me be clear," she began, her voice carrying authority through the quiet courtroom. "You're asking this court to remove 2 newborn infants from their mother's care based on what you claim is emotional instability." The clinic's attorney stood. "Your Honor, Given the unusual circumstances that your client appears to have created. Judge Reeves interrupted. I've reviewed the preliminary evidence. We have a mother who followed all proper medical and legal protocols, and a father whose genetic material was apparently used without consent. If anyone's judgment should be questioned here, I'd suggest looking closer to home. Dillon felt Adeline release a shaky breath beside him. The petition for emergency custody is denied, Judge Reeves continued. Furthermore, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order preventing the clinic from any contact with either parent or the infants until a full hearing can be scheduled. She fixed the clinic's attorney with a stern look. I strongly suggest your clients preserve all records related to this case. Outside the courtroom, Adeline sagged against the wall, tears of relief streaming down her face. Dillon's legal team quietly excused themselves to begin preparing their countersuit. Hey, Dillon said gently, touching her shoulder. Let's get you somewhere safe to rest. He hesitated, then continued. I have a secure apartment building downtown. It's like a hotel, but with better security. Would you consider moving there temporarily, just until we sort this out? Adeline wiped her eyes. I can't afford. It's owned by my company. Dillon interrupted. Used for visiting executives and such. Please, Adeline, it would make me feel better knowing you and the twins are somewhere protected. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, thank you. Within hours, Dillon had arranged everything. The two-bedroom apartment was on the 20th floor, with sweeping views of the city and round-the-clock security in the lobby. Adeline's mother helped her get settled while Dillon handled the paperwork, making sure they had everything they needed. That evening, after Adeline's mother had gone home, Dillon stopped by to check on them. He found Adeline in the nursery, looking overwhelmed as both twins began crying simultaneously. Can I help? He offered from the doorway. Adeline's relief was visible. Would you? Their bottles are ready in the kitchen. If you could feed James while I take care of Emma. Dillon carefully lifted his son. The thought still sent a jolt through him, and cradled him in his arms. The baby's cries softened as Dillon offered the bottle, tiny fingers wrapping around his larger one. There you go, little man, he murmured, surprised by how natural it felt. That's better, isn't it? Adeline watched him from the rocking chair where she nursed Emma, her expression soft with something that might have been wonder. Dillon pretended not to notice her gaze, focusing instead on James's peaceful face as he drank. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows as darkness fell. Both babies eventually dozed off, and Dillon helped Adeline settle them in their cribs. They tiptoed out of the nursery, leaving the door slightly ajar. In the living room, an awkward silence fell. Dillon sat in an armchair while Adeline curled up on the couch, both of them suddenly uncertain how to act around each other. The intimacy of caring for the twins together had created a strange new dynamic neither quite knew how to navigate. Thank you, Adeline said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. For everything today. The lawyers, this place, the way you are with them. Dillon nodded, his throat tight with emotion he couldn't express. He watched her in the soft lamplight. This woman who had unexpectedly given him the family he'd thought impossible. The distance between their seats felt both too far and not far enough. The insistent buzzing of Adeline's phone jolted her awake at 6:15 in the morning. Multiple news alerts flashed across her screen, each one making her stomach sink further. She clicked the first link with trembling fingers. Breaking. Denver billionaire Dillon Renner fathers twins in fertility clinic scandal. The article's headline screamed in bold letters, accompanied by photos of Dillon leaving the courthouse yesterday. Below it was a grainy shot of Adeline carrying one of the twins into the hospital, her face mercifully obscured. Her phone rang. "Dylan, I assume you've seen it," he said without preamble, his voice tight with tension. "My PR team is waiting at my office. Can you come? We need to get ahead of this." 30 minutes later, Adeline's mother arrived to watch the twins while Adeline made her way to the gleaming downtown high-rise that housed Dylan's corporate headquarters. The security guard escorted her directly to the top floor, where Dylan waited by the elevator. "I'm so sorry about this," he said quietly, leading her into a spacious conference room where 3 people sat reviewing tablets and laptops. Dylan's PR advisor, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, stood to greet them. "Ms. Blake, I'm Sarah Mitchell. We need to craft a statement quickly before speculation gets worse." She gestured to the wall-mounted screens displaying various news websites. "The story's gone national." Adeline sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the headlines accusing the clinic of illegal practices and hinting at corporate espionage involving Dylan's genetic material. Some articles even suggested their situation was a calculated publicity stunt. "The key," Sarah explained, "is controlling the narrative. We need to present a united front, 2 innocent parties brought together by circumstances beyond their control, now focused solely on protecting their children." They spent the next 2 hours carefully crafting a statement that emphasized the legal and ethical violations by the clinic, while maintaining Dylan and Adeline's commitment to their children's well-being. Sarah's team arranged for the statement to be released through respected media outlets. "Now," Sarah said when they finished, "try to go about your day normally. Show them you have nothing to hide. You have that pediatric appointment this afternoon, correct?" Adeline nodded, surprised Sarah knew their schedule. "Good. Be seen taking care of your children together. It reinforces the message that you're handling this situation with grace and maturity." The pediatrician's office had cleared their schedule to give Dylan and Adeline privacy during the twins' checkup. Emma fussed as soon as they arrived, a tiny face scrunching up in distress at the unfamiliar environment. "Here," Adeline said, starting to reach for her, but Dylan was already lifting Emma from her carrier. "Hey, princess," he murmured, cradling her against his chest. "It's okay. Daddy's got you." Adeline's heart squeezed at the tenderness in his voice. Emma settled almost immediately, tucking her face into Dylan's neck as he swayed gently. James, always the calmer twin, watched the scene with wide eyes from Adeline's arms. Dr. Patterson, a grandmotherly woman with kind eyes, examined both babies thoroughly. "They're doing beautifully," she assured them. "Perfect weight gain, strong reflexes, excellent muscle tone." Dylan hadn't put Emma down once, even helping with her examination while keeping her secure in his arms. He seemed to have an instinct for soothing her, knowing exactly how to hold her to make her feel safe. After the appointment, Dylan suggested lunch at a small cafe he knew, one with private booths away from windows. Once they were settled with their food, a heavy silence fell between them. "Tell me about him," Dylan said suddenly. "Your fiancé." Adeline's hand trembled slightly as she set down her water glass. "His name was Michael. He was a firefighter." She smiled sadly. "We met when I was doing my midwifery rotation in the emergency department. He came in with a minor injury from a call, and he kept finding excuses to come back and see me." Dylan listened intently as she continued. "We were together for 2 years. The accident happened 3 months before our wedding. He was off duty driving home in the rain." Her voice caught. The other driver was texting. Michael never had a chance. "I'm so sorry," Dylan said softly. "After I lost him, I threw myself into work. But something was missing. I'd always wanted to be a mother, and Michael and I had talked about having a big family." She met Dylan's eyes. "That's why I chose the fertility clinic. I couldn't face dating again, but I didn't want to give up my dream of having children." Dylan was quiet for a long moment. "I was 28 when I got sick," he finally said. "A severe case of mumps that went undiagnosed too long. The fever." He swallowed hard. "The doctors said the damage was permanent, that I'd never father children." "But you did," Adeline said gently. "Somehow you did." "Yeah." His voice was rough with emotion. I wish I'd known about them from the beginning. Been there for the whole pregnancy, for their birth." "You're here now," Adeline assured him. "That's what matters." They finished lunch in companionable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Dylan insisted on driving them home, carrying the twins' carriers up to the apartment himself. Adeline settled the babies in their bassinets, watching as they drifted off to sleep. Through the nursery doorway, she could see Dylan gathering his things to leave. He moved with the same quiet confidence he always had, but now she saw past the polished exterior. She saw the loneliness in his eyes, the way he lingered over each goodbye to the twins, the gentle care he took with them that spoke of a deep, aching need for connection. He wasn't just a billionaire whose life had collided with hers through some bizarre twist of fate. He was a man who'd carried the weight of his secret pain alone for years, who'd thought he'd never have the family he desperately wanted. Now that he had one, however unexpectedly, she could see him fighting to hold on to it with everything he had. Standing in the quiet nursery, watching her sleeping children, Adeline realized her own perspective had shifted completely. The intimidating figure she'd first met in that delivery room had become something else entirely. Someone real, vulnerable, and just as scared of losing this precious gift as she was. The next 48 hours passed in a whirlwind of legal meetings and investigations. Dylan's team of attorneys had taken over the main conference room at his corporate headquarters, walls covered with timeline charts and documentation. Adeline sat beside Dylan through endless hours of questions, both of them trying to piece together how this could have happened. "Mr. Renner," one of the investigators said, spreading out a stack of medical records, "we've traced your genetic material back to the hospital where you were treated for mumps. Standard protocol required DNA sampling to monitor your condition. Those samples should have been destroyed after your treatment concluded." Dylan leaned forward, his jaw tight. "But they weren't." "No, sir. We've found evidence that a lab technician sold several samples to private fertility clinics. The practice appears to have been widespread, targeting wealthy patients specifically." Adeline's hand found Dylan's arm, squeezing gently. His muscles were tense under her touch, but he didn't pull away. "The theft occurred 7 years ago," another attorney added. "The statute of limitations for the criminal charges has expired, but we have solid grounds for civil action against both the hospital and the fertility clinic." Dylan nodded mechanically, but Adeline could see the hurt in his eyes. This violation went beyond legal implications. It was deeply personal, a theft of something precious he never knew he had to protect. Each evening, despite the emotional toll of their days, Dylan appeared at the apartment precisely at 7 o'clock for the twins' nighttime routine. He'd learned quickly how to prepare bottles at exactly the right temperature, how to burp them properly, even how to change diapers with surprising skill. On the second night, as Dylan cradled James while giving him his bottle, Adeline couldn't help but smile at how natural he looked. The fierce businessman was gone, replaced by a gentle father who hummed softly to his son. "You're getting good at this," she said quietly, settling Emma against her shoulder. Dylan's eyes crinkled with warmth. "They make it easy. They're perfect." After both babies were finally asleep, Dylan lingered in the nursery doorway. "Have you eaten?" he asked suddenly. Adeline realized she hadn't, not since a rushed sandwich at lunch. "Actually, no." "Let me cook for you," he offered. "I noticed the kitchen's pretty well stocked." She raised an eyebrow. "You cook. Don't sound so surprised." He laughed softly. I live alone, had to learn eventually. Nothing fancy, but I make a mean pasta primavera. I'd like that, she said, surprised by how much she meant it. The apartment's kitchen was small compared to what Dylan must be used to, but he moved around it with easy confidence. Adeline sat at the counter, watching as he chopped vegetables with precise movements. Where did you learn to cook? She asked. My grandmother, he replied, sliding garlic into a pan. She insisted no grandson of hers would survive on takeout, spent every Sunday teaching me basics when I was in college. The simple domesticity of the moment struck Adeline, this powerful man in his expensive suit, sleeves rolled up as he stirred sauce in her temporary kitchen. It felt right, somehow. They ate at the small dining table, the lights from the city twinkling through the windows. Dylan told stories about his grandmother, making Adeline laugh with tales of his early cooking disasters. She shared memories of learning to bake with her mother, of the Christmas cookies they still made together every year. This is nice, Dylan said softly, during a comfortable lull in conversation. Normal. Adeline understood exactly what he meant. Despite the chaos surrounding them, this quiet moment felt like a glimpse of what could be. After helping with the dishes, despite Adeline's protests, Dylan made his usual round to check on the twins one last time. Adeline followed him into the nursery, watching as he approached James's bassinet. Dylan reached down, his large hand engulfing his son's tiny one. His lips moved in silent prayer, eyes closed in profound concentration. The sight brought unexpected tears to Adeline's eyes, this private moment of devotion and gratitude. When he finished, he touched Emma's cheek just as gently, whispering another prayer over her. The tenderness in his expression made Adeline's heart ache in a way she hadn't felt since Michael. They're so blessed to have you, she said softly. Dylan turned to her, emotion raw in his eyes. I'm the blessed one, he replied. I never dreamed I could have this. At the door, he paused, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Same time tomorrow? We'll be here. She smiled. As he walked down the hallway towards the elevator, Adeline caught a glimpse of his face. For the first time since she'd met him, Dylan was smiling. Not his practiced public smile, but something real and joyful that transformed his entire face. It was the smile of a man who had found something he thought was forever out of reach. Family. Closing the door, Adeline leaned against it, her own smile lingering. Somehow, in the midst of this legal storm, they'd found moments of peace, of connection, of hope. After another grueling meeting with the attorneys on Friday afternoon, Dylan turned to Adeline in the parking garage. His normally pristine suit was slightly rumpled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. I have an idea, he said, running a hand through his hair. What if we got away for a couple of days? Adeline shifted Emma in her arms, looking uncertain. Away? I have a lodge up in the mountains, Dylan explained. It's private, peaceful, no reporters camping outside, just trees and a lake. He touched James's tiny hand where the baby slept in his carrier. The twins could use some fresh mountain air. Adeline hesitated. The idea of escaping the constant media attention was tempting. Every trip to the grocery store had become an ordeal, with photographers trying to catch glimpses of the babies. Still, going away with Dylan felt like crossing some undefined line. It's completely secure, Dylan added quickly, seeing her uncertainty. There's plenty of room, and my housekeeper keeps it fully stocked. We could leave in the morning, spend the weekend. Looking down at Emma's peaceful face, Adeline made her decision. Okay, she said softly. You're right. We could all use a break. The next morning, Dylan arrived early in a large SUV already loaded with 2 new portable cribs and more baby supplies than they could possibly need for 2 days. Adeline couldn't help but smile at his thoroughness as they carefully secured the twins in their car seats. The drive into the mountains took about 2 hours, with Dylan navigating the winding roads with careful precision. The twins slept most of the way, and Adeline found herself relaxing as the city fell away behind them. The morning sun painted the mountainsides in shades of gold, and the air grew crisp and clean as they climbed higher. When they turned onto a private road, Adeline gasped. The lodge wasn't the rustic cabin she'd imagined, but a stunning timber and stone structure that seemed to grow naturally from the mountainside. Large windows reflected the surrounding pines, and a wraparound deck offered breathtaking views of a crystal-clear lake below. "Dylan, this is beautiful," she breathed. He smiled, looking pleased. "Wait until you see the view from inside." The interior was just as impressive, with soaring ceilings and comfortable furniture in warm earth tones. But what caught Adeline's attention was how child-friendly it already seemed. Corner guards had been installed on the coffee table, outlet covers were in place, and she spotted baby gates ready to be mounted at the stairs. "When did you do all this?" she asked, touched by his thoughtfulness. Dylan shrugged, but his ears turned slightly pink. "I had the housekeeper help get things ready. I want them to be safe here." They settled into an easy rhythm over the next 2 days. Dylan seemed to transform in the mountain setting, trading his suits for soft sweaters and jeans. He couldn't seem to get enough of holding the twins, carrying them around the house, and explaining the view as if they could understand every word. On Saturday afternoon, they bundled the babies into warm clothes and took them for a walk around the property. Dylan pushed the double stroller along the smooth paths, pointing out different types of trees and birds. Adeline walked beside him, their shoulders occasionally brushing, and found herself sharing stories about her midwifery training and the joy of helping bring new life into the world. That evening, after feeding the twins, Dylan insisted on taking both babies so Adeline could enjoy a hot bath in the luxurious master bathroom he'd given her. When she emerged, relaxed and refreshed, she found him in the great room, rocking by the fireplace with a baby in each arm. The sight made her heart catch. Dylan's head was bent close to the twins, and he was singing softly, an old lullaby her own mother used to sing. He looked up when she entered, but didn't stop singing until he finished the verse. "My grandmother used to sing that to me," he said quietly. "My mother too," Adeline replied, settling onto the couch nearby. "They look so peaceful with you." Dylan's smile was tender as he gazed at the sleeping infants. "I never knew I could feel this way," he admitted. "It's like they've filled an empty space in my heart I didn't even know was there." The flames crackled in the fireplace, casting warm light across the room. Outside, snow had begun to fall gently, adding to the cozy atmosphere. Later that night, after the twins were settled in their portable cribs, Dylan and Adeline sat on the deck wrapped in thick blankets. The snow had stopped, leaving behind a pristine blanket of white that reflected the moonlight. "I feel like we're already a family," Dylan said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's crazy. We barely know each other. But watching you with them, being here together, it feels right." Adeline's heart raced. She felt it too, this sense of rightness, of belonging. But fear held the words back. She'd lost so much already. Admitting these feelings seemed dangerous somehow. Instead, she reached out and squeezed his hand briefly. His fingers curled around hers for a moment before letting go, and they sat in comfortable silence until the cold drove them inside. The next morning, Dylan knocked softly on her door just before dawn. "Come see this," he whispered. Wrapping herself in a robe, Adeline followed him to the east-facing windows. The twins were already there in their bouncy seats, bundled warmly and watching with wide eyes as the sky began to lighten. Together, they watched the sun rise over the mountains, painting the snow-covered landscape in brilliant pinks and golds. The lake below reflected the colors like a mirror, creating a double sunrise. The twins cooed softly, reaching toward the light with tiny hands. In that moment, surrounded by such natural beauty, and with both babies safe and content, Adeline felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Looking at Dylan, she saw the same peace reflected in his eyes. No lawyers, no reporters, no complicated emotions, just this perfect, quiet moment with their unlikely family. The sun climbed higher, filling the room with warm light, but they remained there, reluctant to break the spell. Emma fell asleep in her seat while James watched the light dance on the lake below, his father's hand resting gently on his back. For these few precious minutes, the world outside ceased to exist, and everything felt possible. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the pediatrician's waiting room as Adeline gently rocked the twins' double stroller back and forth. She checked her phone again. No messages from Dylan. He was still tied up in depositions, working with their legal team to build a case against the fertility clinic. "Elijah and Emma Blake?" The nurse called, smiling warmly as she approached. Adeline maneuvered the stroller through the doorway, following the nurse down the brightly decorated hallway. Colorful animal murals lined the walls, but she barely noticed them today. Her mind kept drifting to Dylan, wondering how he was holding up in the intense questioning. Dr. Peterson, their pediatrician, greeted them with her usual cheerful demeanor. "How are our little ones doing today?" "They're eating well, sleeping better," Adeline reported, lifting Emma onto the exam table first. "Emma's starting to smile more." The doctor checked Emma thoroughly, pronouncing her development right on track. Then it was Elijah's turn. As Dr. Peterson listened to his chest with her stethoscope, her expression changed subtly. She moved the instrument to different positions, listening intently. "Is something wrong?" Adeline asked, her heart beginning to race. "I'm hearing a slight irregularity in Elijah's breathing pattern," Dr. Peterson said carefully. "It could be nothing, but I'd like to run some additional tests to be sure." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of medical procedures. Elijah remained surprisingly calm through the EKG and ultrasound, while Emma dozed peacefully in her car seat. Adeline's training as a midwife helped her understand the technical terms being thrown around, which only increased her anxiety. By early afternoon, Adeline sat in Dr. Peterson's office, trying to keep her hands from shaking as she looked at the test results spread across the desk. "Elijah has what we call inherited cardiac conduction disorder," Dr. Peterson explained gently. "It's a rare genetic condition that affects the heart's electrical system. We caught it very early, which is good news." Adeline's medical knowledge kicked in automatically. "It's hereditary?" "Yes, usually passed down through families. Has Mr. Renner mentioned any heart conditions in his family history?" Adeline shook her head slowly, her mind racing. Dylan had never discussed his family's medical history. They'd barely had time to learn anything about each other's backgrounds in the whirlwind of the past weeks. Dr. Peterson continued explaining the conditions. Implications. Elijah would need regular monitoring throughout his life. There was a possibility of future surgeries, depending on how the condition progressed. Medication would likely be necessary to manage symptoms. With proper care and monitoring, many people with this condition lead normal, healthy lives, Dr. Peterson assured her. But it's important that both parents are fully informed and involved in the treatment plan. Adeline nodded mechanically, but her thoughts were spinning out of control. Dylan had already been through so much medical trauma with his own illness years ago. the one that had supposedly left him sterile. How would he handle knowing his son inherited a condition that might require the same kind of endless doctor's visits and procedures he'd endured? She thought about how far they'd come in the past weeks, how Dylan had slowly opened up and allowed himself to bond with the twins. The tender moments at the mountain lodge were still fresh in her memory. What if this news caused him to withdraw, to put up those walls again? "Would you like me to call Mr. Renner?" Dr. Peterson offered, reaching for the phone. "No," Adeline said quickly, then tried to soften her tone. "No, thank you. He's in important legal meetings today. I'll tell him myself." The doctor nodded and handed her a thick folder of information about the condition, along with prescriptions and referrals to cardiac specialists. "We'll need to schedule a follow-up appointment next week. Both parents should attend if possible." Adeline gathered the twins and all the paperwork, her mind racing as she tried to process everything. The drive back to the temporary apartment was a blur. She kept glancing in the rearview mirror at Elijah, sleeping peacefully in his car seat. He looked so perfect, so healthy. How could something be wrong with his tiny heart? Once home, she spent hours reading through the medical information while the twins napped. The more she learned about the condition, the more her anxiety grew. Though treatable, it would require constant vigilance, regular medical interventions, and careful monitoring of Elijah's activity levels as he grew. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dylan. "Finally done with depositions. Bringing dinner and flowers to celebrate surviving this day. See you in 20 minutes. Adeline stared at the message, her throat tight. The medical papers seemed to stare back at her from the coffee table. With trembling hands, she gathered them all up and slipped them into her purse, tucking it away in the bedroom closet. "Just until I figure out how to tell him," she whispered to herself. "Just until I find the right way." She heard Dylan's key in the lock just as she finished wiping her eyes and checking her reflection in the mirror. He stepped inside, holding a bouquet of bright spring flowers and wearing the warm smile that had become so familiar lately. "How are my favorite people?" he asked softly, mindful of the sleeping twins. Adeline forced a smile, trying to ignore the weight of the secret now hanging between them. "We're good," she said, taking the flowers. "We're all good." The next afternoon brought a rare moment of domestic tranquility to the temporary apartment. Sunlight streamed through the windows as Adeline prepared for the twins' bath time, laying out soft towels and gentle baby soap. Her hands trembled slightly as she tested the water temperature, her mind heavy with the secret she carried. Dylan arrived right on schedule, knocking softly before using his key. "Bath time already?" he asked, rolling up his sleeves with enthusiasm. Over the past weeks, this had become one of his favorite routines. Seeing the babies splash and giggle in the warm water always brought out his brightest smile. "Yes, they're getting a bit fussy," Adeline replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She lifted Emma first, while Dylan carefully cradled Elijah. The sight of him holding their son made her heart clench. He was so gentle, so natural with them now. How could she tell him about Elijah's condition? Dylan noticed her distraction as they worked together, bathing the twins in the specially designed infant tub. "You seem tired today," he commented, supporting Elijah's head while Adeline shampooed Emma's fine baby hair. "Did they keep you up last night?" "Oh, yes, a bit," she lied, grateful for the ready excuse. In truth, she'd barely slept, going over and over how to break the news about Elijah's heart condition. As they dried and dressed the babies, Dylan continued to shoot concerned glances her way. Her movements were mechanical, lacking their usual fluid grace. When she nearly put Emma's diaper on backward, Dylan gently touched her arm. "Why don't you rest for a while? I can handle the rest of their routine." Adeline wanted to protest, but exhaustion, both physical and emotional, was catching up with her. She nodded gratefully and settled onto the couch, watching as Dylan competently dressed both babies in their sleepers. The afternoon melted into evening. Dylan ordered dinner, insisting Adeline eat something while he fed the twins their bottles. She picked at her food, her appetite diminished by guilt and worry. The babies were surprisingly calm, perhaps sensing the unusual tension in the air. "You're sure you're just tired?" Dylan asked again, his voice soft with concern as he burped Elijah. "You seem, I don't know, almost afraid of something." Adeline's heart jumped. "I'm fine," she said quickly, too quickly. "Just overwhelmed with everything, I guess." Dylan didn't look convinced, but he didn't push further. They spent the next hour in the living room, the twins dozing in their bouncy seats while soft music played in the background. Despite her anxiety, Adeline felt her eyes growing heavy. The sleepless night before was catching up with her. "Just rest," Dylan murmured, seeing her struggle to stay awake. "I'll keep an eye on them." She didn't mean to fall asleep, but the next thing she knew, the room was dimmer and quieter. Through half-closed eyes, she watched Dylan moving quietly around the living room, tidying up the day's chaos of bottles, burp cloths, and baby supplies. He picked up her purse, intending to place it on the hall table where she usually kept it. The bag was unusually heavy, and as he lifted it, a thick manila folder slipped out, spilling papers across the hardwood floor. Dylan knelt to gather them, his movements freezing as medical letterhead caught his eye. His hands began to shake as he read the words, "Diagnosis, Inherited Cardiac Conduction Disorder." Elijah's name was at the top of the page, followed by yesterday's date. The room seemed to tilt as he read through the documentation. Treatment plans, medication schedules, surgical possibilities. Each page felt like a physical blow, but nothing hurt quite like the realization that Adeline had chosen to hide this from him. He stood slowly, papers clutched in his hands, and moved to where Adeline dozed on the couch. "Adeline," he said softly, touching her shoulder. "Wake up, please." She stirred, blinking in confusion before her eyes focused on what he held. All the color drained from her face. "Why didn't you tell me?" Dylan's voice was barely above a whisper, but the pain in it filled the room. "When did you find out?" "Yesterday." Adeline choked out, tears already spilling down her cheeks. "At his checkup. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" The hurt in his eyes was unbearable. "That you would pull away," she sobbed. "That knowing about another medical condition would be too much after everything you've been through. I was going to tell you, I needed time to find the right way." Dylan stared at her, his expression a complex mixture of pain, betrayal, and something else. Disappointment. Without a word, he set the papers on the coffee table and walked to where the twins slept. He touched Elijah's cheek with infinite tenderness, then straightened up. "I need some air," he said quietly, already moving toward the door. I need to think." "Dylan, please." Adeline started to rise, but he was already opening the door. "Just don't follow me right now." The door closed behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. As if sensing their mother's distress, both twins began to stir and whimper. Their cries grew stronger as Adeline collapsed back onto the couch, burying her face in her hands as sobs racked her body. The baby's cries grew more insistent, harmonizing with her own weeping in a heartbreaking chorus that filled the apartment. But Adeline couldn't move, couldn't think past the look of betrayal in Dylan's eyes and the devastating possibility that her fear might have destroyed the delicate trust they'd been building. The morning sun painted Denver's skyline in shades of gold, But Dylan Renner barely noticed. He stood at his penthouse window, still, wearing yesterday's wrinkled clothes, his phone clutched in his hand. It had been buzzing steadily since dawn with messages from Adeline. "I'm so sorry, please talk to me. The doctors say it's manageable with treatment. Dylan, the babies need you. I need you." Each message felt like another crack in his already fractured heart. He couldn't bring himself to reply, though his thumbs hovered over the keyboard countless times. The betrayal sat heavy in his chest, mixing with worry for Elijah and anger at himself for walking away. His phone rang. Not Adeline this time, but his lead attorney. Dylan answered mechanically. "Mr. Renner, we have a situation." The lawyer's voice was tense. "Internal documents from the clinic have leaked to several news outlets. They're painting a picture of instability in your relationship with Ms. Blake and the children." Dylan pressed his forehead against the cool glass. "What exactly are they saying?" "They're using your absence last night as evidence. Someone saw you leave the apartment complex. They're spinning it as abandonment, suggesting neither you nor Ms. Blake are emotionally equipped to handle this situation." "They're watching us?" Dylan's voice rose sharply. "The clinic has hired private investigators. They're building a case that the stress is affecting your judgment, both of you. Your withdrawal now plays right into their hands." Dylan closed his eyes, remembering Adeline's tear-stained face as he'd walked out. "What do you suggest?" "Frankly, get back there. Show a united front. Whatever personal issues you're dealing with, they need to take a back seat to protecting those children." After hanging up, Dylan paced his living room, the space feeling cavernous and empty. His anger at Adeline's deception warred with understanding of her fear. Hadn't he spent years hiding his own medical history, terrified of appearing weak or damaged? Hours crept by. Dylan's phone continued to buzz with messages from Adeline. "The pediatrician can explain everything if you'll meet with us. I know I messed up, but please don't let my mistake hurt the babies. They miss you." The last message included a photo of both twins sleeping, their tiny hands clasped together. Dylan's throat tightened as he studied their peaceful faces. Somewhere in that apartment was a folder full of medical terms that threatened Elijah's future, terms he should have known about immediately. As afternoon faded into evening, Dylan finally left his penthouse. He drove through Denver's rush-hour traffic on autopilot, his mind replaying every moment with the twins. Their first pediatrician visit, the way Elijah would settle instantly in his arms, the sound of their breathing as he rocked them to sleep. The apartment complex parking lot was quiet when he arrived. Dylan pulled into a space with a clear view of Adeline's balcony, but couldn't make himself leave the car. The security lights flickered on as dusk settled over the city. Movement caught his eye. Adeline stepping out onto the balcony, Elijah cradled against her shoulder. Even from this distance, Dylan could see the gentle sway of her body as she paced the small space. Her voice carried faintly on the evening air, singing what sounded like a lullaby. "Hush now, my angel. Be still, love. Don't cry." Dylan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Elijah's small form was wrapped in the blue blanket Dylan had brought him just days ago. Adeline's face was turned down toward the baby, her expression full of such tender concern that it made Dylan's chest ache. She looked exhausted, even from here. Had she slept at all? Was she handling both babies alone? The questions plagued him, but he remained frozen in his seat, unable to bridge the distance his hurt had created. Adeline shifted Elijah to her other shoulder, still singing softly. The baby's tiny hand reached up, touching her cheek in a gesture that seemed to hold all the trust and love in the world. Dylan watched as she pressed a kiss to Elijah's palm, and the simple action sent a wave of longing through him so strong it left him breathless. The clinic's threat loomed in his mind. They were watching, waiting for any sign of weakness to exploit. His absence was ammunition they would use against both of them, against the twins. Yet when Dylan turned the key in the ignition, it wasn't duty or legal strategy driving his actions. It was the sight of Adeline's solitary figure on the balcony, caring for their son who needed them both to be stronger than their fears. The car pulled away from the curb, headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. In his rearview mirror, Dylan could still see Adeline swaying with Elijah, their silhouette framed against the warm light spilling from the apartment. The image stayed with him as he drove into the night, his heart torn between the pull to return and the hurt that kept him away. The morning sun cast long shadows across Dylan's Aunt Margaret's front porch as he pulled into her driveway. Her modest brick home, with its carefully tended flower beds and wind chimes tinkling in the breeze, had always been a sanctuary for him during difficult times. Margaret Renner opened the door before he could knock, her silver hair neatly styled and her keen eyes taking in his disheveled appearance. "I was wondering when you'd show up," she said, pulling him into a firm hug. The familiar scent of lavender and fresh-baked bread enveloped him. "How did you know I'd come?" Dylan asked, following her into the warm kitchen. "Because I know you, Dylan James Renner," she replied, gesturing for him to sit at the well-worn oak table while she poured 2 cups of tea. "And I know when my nephew is carrying a burden too heavy to bear alone." Steam rose from the delicate china cups as Margaret added honey to both, just as she had done since Dylan was a child. The routine of it settled something in his chest, even as anxiety churned beneath the surface. "I saw the news," Margaret said quietly, sliding his cup across the table. "About the twins. About Adeline." Dylan wrapped his hands around the warm cup but didn't drink. "It's more complicated now," he said, his voice rough. "One of the babies, Elijah, he has—" The words stuck in his throat. "Take your time," Margaret said, her tone gentle but firm. It was the same voice she'd used during her years as an army nurse, Dylan knew, the voice that had guided countless soldiers through their darkest moments. "He has a genetic heart condition," Dylan finally managed. "From my side of the family. And Adeline. She knew for days but didn't tell me." Margaret's expression remained neutral as she sipped her tea. "And you're angry about that?" "Yes, no." Dylan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I don't know. I understand why she was afraid to tell me, but it brought up all your old fears." Margaret finished softly. Dylan's shoulders slumped. "I thought I was past it. The illness. Finding out I couldn't have children. But now—" He swallowed hard. "How can I be a father to a sick child when I can barely face my own medical history?" Margaret set down her cup with a decisive clink. "Dylan, look at me." He raised his eyes to meet hers, finding them full of the unwavering strength that had helped shape him after his parents' death. "Love isn't about being strong enough," she said firmly. "It's about being willing enough. Willing to stay when it's hard. Willing to face what scares you because someone needs you more than you need your fear." "But what if I fail them?" The question came out barely above a whisper. Margaret reached across the table to cover his hand with hers. "Do you remember what I told you when you were in the hospital? When the doctors said you might not make it?" Dylan nodded slowly. "You said God doesn't give us more than we can handle." "No," Margaret corrected. "I said God doesn't give us more than he can handle through us. There's a difference." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at her garden where early morning light played across the roses. "Miracles rarely come in the form we expect, Dylan. You wanted children but thought it was impossible. Now you have 2 beautiful babies who need you. Elijah's condition doesn't take away from that blessing. If anything, it proves you were entrusted with something sacred." Dylan stared into his tea, letting her words sink in. "I've been hiding in my penthouse for 2 days," he admitted, leaving Adeline alone with both babies. "And how's that working out for everyone?" Margaret's tone held a gentle challenge. "The clinic's lawyers are using it against us, saying we're unstable, unfit." Dylan's hands clenched around his cup. "They're trying to take the twins away." Margaret turned back to face him, her expression fierce. "Then why are you sitting here instead of fighting for your family?" The word family hit Dylan like a physical force. In his mind, he saw Adeline on the balcony, singing to Elijah, saw both twins sleeping peacefully in their bassinets, remembered the way Emma's tiny fingers had wrapped around his thumb that first day. "I'm scared," he whispered. "Of course you are," Margaret said, returning to sit beside him. "Love is terrifying. It means opening yourself up to loss, to pain, to disappointment. But it also means opening yourself up to joy beyond measure." She squeezed his shoulder. "The question is, which will you choose? Love or fear?" Dylan sat in silence for a long moment, letting memories wash over him. The warmth in Adeline's eyes when she watched him with the twins, the peace he'd felt at the mountain lodge, the way his heart had expanded with each tiny milestone. First smile, first grip, first coo. "I don't want to lose them," he said finally. "Then don't," Margaret replied simply. "Get in your car, go to that apartment and choose love. Choose it every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Dylan stood up, something settling in his chest, resolve replacing uncertainty. Margaret walked him to the door, but before he could leave, she pulled him into another fierce hug. "Those babies are a gift," she whispered. "And so is their mother. Don't let fear rob you of either." The drive back to Denver seemed both endless and too short. Dylan's mind raced with all he needed to say to Adeline, all he needed to make right. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as he pulled into the apartment complex parking lot. This time, he didn't hesitate. His feet carried him surely up the stairs, down the familiar hallway, to her door. He could hear Emma's soft babbling from inside, and Adeline's gentle voice responding. Dylan took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened slowly, revealing Adeline standing there with red-rimmed eyes and tear-stained cheeks. Her honey-blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore the same sweater from 2 days ago. The sight of her obvious distress made Dylan's heart clench. "Dylan, she began, but he held up his hand gently. "Please, let me go first." His voice was soft but steady. "I'm so sorry, Adeline. I abandoned you when you needed me most. When our son needed me most. I let my fear control me, and that's unforgivable." Adeline's lower lip trembled, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "No, I'm the one who's sorry," she choked out. "I should have told you about Elijah's diagnosis right away. I was just so scared you'd—" A sob caught in her throat. "That I'd run?" Dylan finished quietly. "Like I did anyway?" She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to hold herself together. Dylan stepped forward, gathering her into his arms. She stiffened for just a moment before melting against him, her tears soaking into his shirt. "I promise you," he whispered into her hair, "I won't walk away again. Not from you, not from our children. Never again. I was so alone." Adeline whispered against his chest. "These past 2 days, trying to process everything by myself." "I know, I'm sorry." Dylan stroked her back gently. "But you're not alone anymore. We're in this together." From inside the apartment came a soft whimper, then the distinctive cry of one of the twins. Adeline pulled back, wiping her eyes. "That's Elijah," He's due for his medicine. Can I? Dylan hesitated. Can I help? The smile that bloomed across Adeline's tear-stained face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Of course. They walked together to the nursery where both twins lay in their cribs. Emma was sleeping peacefully, but Elijah was squirming, his tiny face scrunched up in discomfort. Dylan reached down and lifted him with careful hands, cradling him against his chest. "Hey there, little warrior," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Daddy's here now." He pressed his lips to Elijah's forehead, breathing in that perfect baby smell. "I promise you, I'm going to fight for you with everything I have. Whatever you need, the best doctors, the best treatments, you'll have it all. But more than that, you'll have my love. Always." Adeline returned with a small dropper of medicine, showing Dylan how to administer it. Together, they soothed Elijah until his fussing subsided, and he drifted back to sleep. Dylan couldn't bring himself to put him down right away, so they moved to the living room couch, where he continued holding their son. "Tell me everything about his condition," Dylan said softly. "I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Adeline retrieved the medical file and sat beside him. "It's called congenital cardiomyopathy," she explained, showing him the diagnosis papers. "His heart muscle isn't as strong as it should be. He'll need regular monitoring, medication, and possibly surgery as he grows." Dylan listened intently as she detailed the treatment plan, the recommended specialists, and the warning signs they needed to watch for. His free hand found hers and squeezed it gently. "We'll handle this together," he assured her. "I've already started researching the top pediatric cardiologists in the country." "The medical bills," Adeline began worriedly, "are not something you need to think about," Dylan said firmly. "My resources are yours now, ours. The twins' trust funds are already set up, and I've added special provisions for medical care." Adeline's eyes widened. "You did that even while I was being an idiot and hiding in my penthouse, yes?" Dylan gave her a self-deprecating smile. "My heart was here even when I wasn't brave enough to be." They spent the next hour making plans, scheduling appointments with specialists, organizing their legal strategy against the clinic, and discussing how to handle the media attention that would inevitably increase once news of Elijah's condition leaked out. "We should meet with my PR advisor tomorrow," Dylan suggested. "She'll help us craft a statement that protects the twins' privacy while addressing the public's concerns." Adeline nodded, stifling a yawn. The emotional exhaustion of the past few days was clearly catching up with her. Dylan shifted slightly, encouraging her to rest her head on his shoulder. She hesitated only briefly before settling against him, her body gradually relaxing. "I keep thinking about that weekend at the lodge," she murmured sleepily. "How peaceful it was. How right it felt." "We'll have more weekends like that," Dylan promised. "Many more." Adeline hummed, her eyes drifting closed. Dylan sat there in the quiet apartment, Elijah sleeping soundly against his chest, Adeline's steady breathing beside him, and Emma's soft snuffles coming from the baby monitor. The setting sun cast long shadows across the floor, but for the first time in days, his heart felt light. He had almost let fear cost him everything. But sitting here, surrounded by the family he never thought he'd have, Dylan knew he'd made the right choice. Love over fear, together over alone, family over everything. As Adeline slipped deeper into sleep, her head growing heavier on his shoulder, Dylan pressed a gentle kiss to Elijah's forehead and whispered, "Welcome home, Daddy. Welcome home." The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters as Dylan and Adeline arrived for the first day of hearings. Camera flashes sparked like lightning as Dylan guided Adeline through the crowd, his hand protectively at her back. They'd left the twins with Dylan's Aunt Margaret, knowing the days ahead would be intense. "Remember," Dylan's PR advisor whispered as they approached the entrance. "Stay calm and dignified. Let your attorneys do the talking." Inside the courtroom, the fertility clinic's director sat with his legal team, looking significantly less confident than during their previous encounter. As evidence was presented, it became clear why. "Your Honor," their attorney began, "we have documented proof of at least 17 other cases where genetic material was misappropriated without consent." She displayed charts and records on the courtroom screen. The clinic maintained a secret database of prominent donors, obtained through routine medical procedures without patient knowledge. The judge's expression darkened as she reviewed the files. More damning evidence emerged throughout the morning. Falsified consent forms, altered medical records, and a pattern of targeting wealthy or influential patients. During a brief recess, Adeline gripped Dylan's hand. "I can't believe how many families they've hurt," she whispered. Dylan squeezed back. "We're going to help make it right," he promised. When the proceedings resumed, the clinic's attorney attempted to paint Dylan and Adeline as emotionally unstable parents, but their composed demeanor in court told a different story. The judge was particularly moved by their joint dedication to Elijah's medical care. "The court finds clear and convincing evidence of systematic illegal practices," the judge declared on the third day. "I hereby order the immediate closure of the facility pending full criminal investigation." She turned to Dylan and Adeline. "Regarding custody, this court grants joint legal and physical custody to both parents, with no interference from the clinic or its representatives." Tears of relief streamed down Adeline's face as Dylan pulled her into a tight embrace. Outside the courthouse, they faced the media together. Today, justice was served. Dylan stated clearly into the forest of microphones. "But our work isn't finished. I'm announcing the creation of the New Beginnings Fund, a $25 million initiative to support families affected by unethical fertility practices and to advocate for stronger industry oversight." Adeline stepped forward to add, "We hope our story helps other families find the courage to come forward and seek justice." The next morning found them in a very different setting, the pediatric cardiology wing of Denver Children's Hospital. Elijah, now 6 weeks old, was having his first major evaluation with the specialist Dylan had found. "The medication is helping," Dr. Harrison explained, showing them the latest echocardiogram. "His heart function has improved 10% since we started treatment." Dylan hadn't missed a single appointment since that night he'd returned to Adeline's apartment. He asked detailed questions, took notes, and held Elijah through every examination. The transformation in him was remarkable. Gone was the guarded, emotionally distant businessman. In his place was a devoted father who sang lullabies, changed diapers, and knew each baby's different cries. "Watch this," Dylan said one evening, demonstrating how he'd learned to calm Elijah's fussing by holding him upright against his chest and swaying gently. "The vertical position helps when he's congested, and I think he likes feeling my heartbeat." Adeline watched them, her own heart full. "You're amazing with him," she said softly. "With both of them." Dylan smiled, the expression now coming naturally and often. "They make it easy to be amazing. They make everything better." Emma, not to be left out, began crying from her bassinet. Adeline scooped her up, and Dylan suggested, "Let's take them outside for some fresh air. It's a beautiful sunset." The hospital's healing garden was quiet that evening, filled with late summer flowers and the gentle splash of a fountain. Dylan positioned them near a blooming rose bush, pulled out his phone, and set the timer. "Our first real family photo," he said, joining them quickly. "Everyone smile. the camera caught them in perfect synchronicity. Dylan with his arm around Adeline, who held Emma, while Dylan cradled Elijah. But more than the composition, it captured something deeper. The joy in Dylan's unreserved smile, the peace in Adeline's eyes, and the sense that this unlikely family had found exactly where they belonged. The image would later sit framed on Dylan's desk, replacing the stark city views he'd once used to keep the world at arm's length. It served as a daily reminder that the biggest miracles often come disguised as our greatest challenges, and that love, when we're brave enough to choose it, has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. As the garden's automatic lights began to glow in the deepening dusk, Dylan looked at his phone's screen and felt his throat tighten with emotion. There they were, his family, his miracle, his new beginning, captured forever in pixels and light. Perfect, he whispered, and for once he wasn't just talking about the photograph. Adeline leaned against him, Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms. Elijah made a soft cooing sound against Dylan's chest. The fountain burbled quietly, and somewhere in the garden, a late-season bird sang its evening song. This was what healing looked like, Dylan realized. Not the absence of challenges, but the presence of love strong enough to face them. Not the perfect life he'd once imagined, but something far better. A real one, with all its beautiful complications. The morning of the baby dedication dawned clear and bright, with golden sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows of Aunt Margaret's cherished community church. The small brick building, nestled among towering maple trees just beginning to show hints of autumn color, had stood as a cornerstone of faith for 3 generations of the Renner family. Inside, Adeline stood in the church nursery, carefully smoothing Emma's christening gown, a delicate confection of antique lace that Aunt Margaret had preserved from Dylan's own dedication ceremony. The tiny girl cooed contentedly as Adeline adjusted the satin ribbon in her dark curls. "There's my precious great-niece." Aunt Margaret appeared in the doorway, her eyes misting at the sight. She wore a elegant navy dress suit that spoke to her military background, softened by a pearl brooch at her collar. "And look at you, Adeline. You're absolutely glowing." Adeline smoothed her cream-colored dress self-consciously. "Thank you for letting us use your church, Margaret. And for the gown. It means so much to have this connection to Dylan's family history." "Speaking of Dylan," Margaret's eyes twinkled. "He's pacing the hallway with Elijah, checking his watch every 30 seconds. That man may run $1 billion company, but today he's just a nervous daddy." As if on cue, Dylan appeared in the doorway, looking handsome in a charcoal suit. He carried Elijah with practiced ease, the baby boy matching his sister in a miniature version of the family christening gown. "Are we ready?" he asked, his voice carrying a slight tremor of emotion. "Almost," Adeline replied, lifting Emma into her arms. She paused to check Elijah's small medical monitor, discreetly clipped to his gown, a constant reminder of the journey that had brought them here. The numbers showed his heart beating strong and steady. Through the nursery window, they could see the sanctuary filling with guests. Members of Dylan's executive team sat beside nurses from the maternity ward. Hospital administrators who had supported them through the crisis chatted with Adeline's midwifery colleagues. Their legal team, who had fought so hard for justice, shared pews with church members who had prayed for them throughout the ordeal. Even Dylan's PR advisor was there, looking uncharacteristically misty-eyed as she helped arrange flowers at the altar. "Look at all these people," Adeline whispered, suddenly overwhelmed. "6 months ago, I thought I'd be doing this alone." Dylan stepped closer, adjusting Emma's ribbon with his free hand. "6 months ago, I thought I'd never have a family at all." He smiled at both babies. God has quite a sense of humor, doesn't he? And timing. Aunt Margaret added firmly. Now, let's not keep everyone waiting. These little ones have a date with destiny. The small church's pipe organ began playing softly as the family made their way down the center aisle. Sunlight painted rainbow patterns across the worn wooden floors, and the scent of lilies filled the air. Adeline felt Dylan's steady presence beside her, their steps naturally falling into sync. Pastor Roberts, who had baptized Dylan as an infant, stood waiting at the altar with a warm smile. His weathered face creased with joy as he looked at the twins. Beloved. His voice carried clearly through the sanctuary. We gather today to dedicate these precious children to God's care and to celebrate the family He has created through His infinite wisdom. As the pastor spoke about God's ability to bring beauty from ashes and joy from sorrow, Adeline glanced at the faces around her. There wasn't a dry eye in the congregation. These people had witnessed their struggle, supported their fight, and now shared in their triumph. Emma Grace and Elijah David. Pastor Roberts continued, using the names they had chosen to honor both their past and their future. You are blessed with parents whose love for you has already moved mountains. Today they dedicate themselves to raising you in faith, hope, and love. The pastor gently touched each baby's forehead with water from the baptismal font, offering prayers for their protection and guidance. Elijah remained peaceful throughout, while Emma reached curiously for the water, causing soft laughter to ripple through the church. These children, Pastor Roberts declared, are a testament to God's perfect plan, a plan that often unfolds in ways we could never imagine, bringing healing to wounds we thought would never close. Dylan's hand found Adeline's then, their fingers intertwining naturally. She felt him squeeze gently as the pastor concluded the blessing, and when she looked up, she saw tears trailing down his cheeks. I thought sterility had ended my future, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. But you and these miraculous babies, you've restored everything I thought was lost. You've given me more than I ever dared to hope for. Adeline's own tears fell freely as she whispered back, I convinced myself that choosing motherhood meant choosing to be alone. But God sent me someone who chose us, who fights for us every day. You've made us so much more than just a family. You've made us whole. The congregation stood as Pastor Roberts presented the family to the church. Dylan wrapped his free arm around Adeline's shoulders, holding her and Emma close while carefully cradling Elijah. Together they turned to face their community, their hearts full of gratitude and wonder. Aunt Margaret led the applause as they made their way back down the aisle, but this time their steps were lighter, more certain. They emerged from the church into warm sunlight that seemed to embrace them like a blessing. Dylan paused at the top of the steps, gathering his family closer. Adeline leaned into his embrace, feeling the rightness of this moment, this new beginning they had fought so hard to secure. The twins, peaceful in their parents' arms, seemed to sense the significance of the day, their tiny faces turned toward the light. Together they took that first step forward, not as two broken people and two surprise babies, but as a family united by choice, strengthened by faith, and bound together by a love that had overcome every obstacle. Their path ahead was bright with promise, their hearts full of hope, and their future rich with possibilities they were ready to face together. The afternoon sun cast long golden rays through the trees as Dylan pulled into the small parking lot near City Park. The weather's perfect, he said, helping Adeline unfold the twin stroller. Let's take advantage of it before heading home. Adeline nodded, carefully transferring Emma and Elijah from their car seats. They love being outside. She smiled, tucking their blankets snugly around them. They walked along the winding path, where cherry trees bloomed in delicate pink clouds above them. The twins seemed mesmerized by the dappled sunlight dancing through the branches. Their tiny faces turned upward as they cooed contentedly. Finding a peaceful spot near the duck pond, they settled onto a weathered wooden bench. Dylan lifted Elijah from the stroller, cradling him against his chest while Adeline gathered Emma into her arms. The baby girl curled her tiny fingers around her mother's thumb, making Adeline's heart melt. "I've been thinking," Dylan said softly, gently patting Elijah's back, "about what comes next for all of us." Adeline turned to face him. "What do you mean?" "Well, there's Elijah's upcoming treatments at Children's Hospital, and I know you're hoping to return to midwifery soon." He paused, watching a family of ducks paddle across the pond. "I want to create a real home for them, for all of us, somewhere the twins can grow up feeling secure and loved, without any shadows hanging over them." The setting sun painted the sky in soft pinks and purples as Dylan took a deep breath and turned to face her fully. "Adeline," he said quietly, his voice full of emotion, "would you consider moving into my home? Not because you feel obligated, but because I want us to build a life together, a real family." Tears welled in Adeline's eyes as she felt the rightness of his words settle deep in her heart. "Yes," she whispered, her voice catching. "Yes, I would love that." They gathered the babies back into their stroller as the evening drew near. Walking back toward the car, their shadows stretched long and warm across the pavement. Dylan's hand found Adeline's, their fingers intertwining naturally as they stepped forward together, ready to embrace the future they had chosen, a future built on love, trust, and the miraculous gift that had brought them together. "Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart."